Judge Judy was about to deliver 8 words that would obliterate a $100 million religious empire and leave America's most beloved prosperity preacher frozen in stunned silence for 45 seconds on live television. But what happened in those 45 seconds would trigger the most explosive scandal in daytime TV history and expose a secret recording that prosperity gospel leaders had desperately tried to bury for years. Joel Osteen walked into Judge Judy's courtroom that Tuesday morning, believing he could charm his way through what seemed like a simple case about an elderly widow's donation. He had no idea he was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap that would destroy his credibility in front of 12 million viewers and change American Christianity forever. The case appeared straightforward. Margaret Thompson, a 73-year-old widow, had donated her entire $85,000 retirement fund to Joel's Lakewood church after being promised that her seed offering would return multiplied within 1 year. When the miracle money never came and she faced eviction, she sued. Joel's legal team was confident this would be easy PR. Show up, smile, talk about faith and blessings, paint the old woman as bitter and faithless, and walk away looking like a persecuted man of God. They had studied Judge Judy's previous cases, involving religious disputes, and believed she would be respectful toward a prominent pastor. They were catastrophically wrong. What Joel didn't know was that Judge Judy had been building a case against prosperity preachers for months. Her producers had received over 300 similar complaints from victims of prosperity gospel schemes, and Judge Judy herself had spent weeks studying the financial practices of megachurch pastors. She had uncovered something explosive, a secret audio recording from Joel's own leadership meetings that would prove he knew exactly what he was doing to vulnerable people. But the recording wasn't just damaging, it was devastating. In it, Joel could be heard laughing about the desperation of his poorest donors and strategizing how to extract more money from grieving families. The moment Joel stepped into her courtroom, Judge Judy knew she had him exactly where she wanted him. This wasn't going to be a routine religious arbitration case. This was going to be the public execution of the prosperity gospel's most famous face. As cameras rolled and 12 million Americans tuned in expecting a typical courtroom drama, they had no idea they were about to witness the most brutal theological takedown in television history. Joel Osteen, the man who never stopped smiling, was about to be exposed as something far darker than anyone imagined. What were those 8 words that made Joel Osteen go completely silent for 45 seconds while millions watched? What was on that secret recording that prosperity gospel leaders had fought desperately to keep hidden? And why did this single courtroom confrontation result in congressional hearings, FBI investigations, and the largest exodus from megachurches in American history? This is the story of the day America's toughest judge took on America's richest preacher and revealed a truth so devastating that 3 major networks initially refused to air the footage, calling it too explosive for daytime television. The confrontation that followed would shatter Joel's carefully constructed image, expose the hidden financial machinery of the prosperity gospel, and prove that sometimes justice comes not from a church pulpit, but from a Brooklyn judge who refuses to let anyone, not even America's most beloved pastor, get away with conning desperate people out of their last dollars. If you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong, because what Judge Judy uncovered about Joel Osteen was far worse than anyone suspected, and the evidence she had been hiding would send shockwaves through the religious world that are still being felt today. If you're ready to see America's toughest judge take on prosperity theology and expose the secret recordings that prove these preachers know exactly what they're doing to vulnerable people, hit that subscribe button now, because this confrontation will challenge everything you think you know about faith, money, and the dark truth behind America's most profitable churches. What you're about to witness didn't just destroy one man's reputation. It brought down an entire industry built on false promises and broken dreams. 3 weeks before the confrontation, Margaret Thompson sat in her cramped studio apartment, holding the eviction notice with trembling hands. The 73-year-old widow had given everything to Joel Osteen's ministry after watching him promise on television that seed offerings would return multiplied within 1 year. Her husband had just died from cancer, leaving her with crushing medical bills and a broken heart. When Joel looked directly into the camera and said God wanted to bless faithful givers with supernatural abundance, Margaret saw it as her last hope. She emptied her retirement account, withdrew her life insurance payout, and sent every penny of her $85,000 to Lakewood Church, believing with desperate faith that God would multiply it back just in time to save her home. That multiplication never came. Instead, she received a generic thank you letter and a plastic bookmark with Joel's smiling face on it. When she called the church explaining her situation, a staff member told her that her lack of financial breakthrough meant she didn't have enough faith. Now, 9 months later, she was facing homelessness while the man who took her money lived in a $10.5 million mansion and flew around the country in private jets. Margaret's story wasn't unique. She was one of thousands who had been financially destroyed by prosperity gospel promises that never materialized. Meanwhile, 400 miles away in Houston, Joel Osteen was reviewing his quarterly financial reports in his luxury office, overlooking the former Compaq Center that housed his 16th 800-seat sanctuary. The numbers were staggering. Lakewood Church brought in over $70 million annually, with the vast majority coming from small donations from elderly, desperate, and financially struggling believers who gave sacrificially because they believed God would reward their faith with earthly riches. What Margaret and millions like her didn't know was that Joel's inner circle regularly discussed the psychological tactics they used to extract maximum donations from their most vulnerable audience members. The secret recording that would later destroy Joel's empire was made during one of these private leadership meetings just 2 months before Margaret's case. In it, Joel could be heard discussing donation strategies with chilling callousness. The people who give the most are usually the ones who can afford it the least, his voice captured clearly on the audio. Desperate people make faithful givers. We just need to keep them believing that their breakthrough is always one more seat away. When one board member expressed concern about elderly people giving their life savings, Joel's response was haunting. Their faith is their choice. Our job is to provide them with opportunities to express that faith financially. Judge Judy's producers had obtained this recording through a former Lakewood insider who had grown disgusted with the ministry's predatory practices. The whistleblower had witnessed Joel personally reviewing lists of the church's poorest donors, specifically targeting widows and retirees with personalized fundraising letters that played on their desperation and grief. The insider provided documentation showing that Joel's team maintained detailed psychological profiles of vulnerable donors, noting their financial situations, family tragedies, and emotional triggers to maximize their giving potential. When Margaret's case landed on Judge Judy's desk, the veteran judge immediately recognized it as an opportunity to expose the systematic exploitation she had been investigating. This wasn't just about one widow's lost savings. This was about a multi-million-dollar operation that deliberately targeted America's most vulnerable citizens with false religious promises designed to extract their last dollars. Judge Judy had built her career on protecting people from scammers and con artists, and she recognized that Joel Osteen was running one of the most sophisticated religious confidence schemes in American history. The trap was set, but Joel had no idea he was walking into an ambush that would expose not just his greed, but his calculated cruelty toward the very people who trusted him most. The moment Joel Osteen walked into Judge Judy's courtroom on that Tuesday morning, his trademark confident smile began to falter. The usual setup felt different. Judge Judy sat behind her bench with an intensity that made even seasoned attorneys nervous, and her eyes tracked Joel's every movement with predatory focus. What Joel didn't notice was the manila folder sitting prominently on her desk, thick with documents that would soon destroy everything he had built. His legal team had assured him this would be a routine case about religious donations and freedom of faith, easily dismissed with his usual charm and theological deflections. They were about to discover how catastrophically wrong they were. Judge Judy wasted no time with pleasantries. Her opening words cut through the courtroom like a blade. Mr. Osteen, before we discuss this case, I want to establish something very clearly. You are not in your church, you are not on your television show, and you are not surrounded by people who hang on your every word. You are in my courtroom, where the only thing that matters is truth, evidence, and facts. Do you understand that? Joel's smile remained frozen on his face, but cameras caught the slight tremor in his hands as he answered, Yes, Your Honor, of course. Judge Judy's response was immediate and brutal. Good, because I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. Margaret Thompson took the stand first, her voice barely above a whisper, as she described giving her life savings to Joel's ministry. As she spoke about her husband's death, her financial desperation, and her belief that God would multiply her seed offering, Joel maintained his practiced expression of pastoral concern. But Judge Judy was watching his micro-expressions, and she could see what the cameras couldn't: the barely concealed impatience and calculation behind his sympathetic facade. When Margaret finished her testimony, wiping tears from her eyes, Judge Judy's voice became deadly quiet. Mrs. Thompson, did anyone from Lakewood Church ever explain to you the statistical probability of your donation being returned multiplied? Margaret's confused response revealed the heart of the deception. Your Honor, Pastor Joel said faith wasn't about statistics, it was about believing in God's promises. Judge Judy's eyes immediately snapped to Joel. Mr. Osteen, is that what you told her? That faith isn't about statistics? Joel's response was smooth and practiced. Your Honor, faith is indeed about trusting in God's provision and believing in His desire to bless His children abundantly. It was exactly the kind of religious language that usually ended uncomfortable questions about his financial practices. But Judge Judy wasn't most people. That's very interesting, Mr. Osteen, Judge Judy replied with dangerous calm. Because I have some statistics I'd like to share with you. She opened the manila folder and pulled out the first document. According to financial records subpoenaed from your church, Lakewood receives approximately $70 million annually in donations. Of that $70 million, how much would you estimate is returned to donors as the multiplied blessings you promise? Joel's practiced smile flickered for the first time. Your Honor, God's blessings come in many forms, not always financial. Judge Judy's response was like a hammer blow. That's not what I asked you. I asked you for a number. How much money goes back to the people who give it to you? The courtroom fell silent as Joel struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't incriminate him. His lawyers had prepared him for questions about faith and theology, not cold financial audits. Your Honor, our church operates transparently, according to all federal guidelines for religious organizations. Judge Judy leaned forward with her signature death stare. Mr. Osteen, you're evading my question. Let me help you with the math. According to your own financial disclosures, less than 3% of donations are ever returned to donors in any form. That means Mrs. Thompson had less than a 3% chance of seeing her money again. But you told her to have faith in God's multiplication. Doesn't that strike you as misleading? Joel's response revealed the first crack in his armor. Your Honor, faith requires stepping out beyond what statistics might suggest. Judge Judy pounced immediately. So you're admitting you know the statistics are against your donors, but you encourage them to ignore those statistics and give anyway? The theological trap was perfectly set, and Joel was walking straight into it. Your Honor, I believe God can do miracles that transcend human understanding, he replied, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. Judge Judy pulled out a second document from her folder. Mr. Osteen, I'm holding a list of your church's top 100 donors from last year. 97 of them are over the age of 65, 63 are widows, and 41 are living on fixed incomes below $30,000 annually. These are the people funding your $10.5 million mansion and your private jets. Does that seem miraculous to you, or does that seem predatory? The question hung in the air like a sword, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, Joel Osteen was completely speechless. The audience could feel the shift in power as America's most beloved prosperity preacher faced off against America's toughest judge, and Judge Judy was just getting started. What she pulled from that manila folder next would shatter Joel's carefully constructed image forever. Judge Judy reached deeper into her manila folder and pulled out a photograph that made Joel's face go pale. Mr. Osteen, do you recognize this? She held up an aerial shot of his $10.5 million River Oaks mansion with its swimming pool, tennis court, and 6-car garage. This is your primary residence, correct? Joel's voice cracked slightly. Yes, Your Honor, but I want to clarify that. Judge Judy cut him off with surgical precision. No clarifications needed. Mrs. Thompson, how many months of rent could you have paid with the $85,000 you gave to fund this mansion? Margaret's tearful response was devastating. About 7 years, Your Honor. The mathematical brutality of the comparison hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Judge Judy wasn't finished. Mr. Osteen, you also own a vacation home in Colorado, worth $2.9 million, correct? And a collection of luxury vehicles including a Ferrari, 2 Mercedes, and a Bentley. Joel tried desperately to regain control. Your Honor, God has blessed our ministry with resources that allow us to reach more people. Judge Judy's interruption was explosive. Stop it. Just stop it right there. You're not reaching people. You're reaching into their wallets. The courtroom erupted with gasps as Judge Judy's fury became unleashed. Mrs. Thompson, while you were choosing between medication and groceries, this man was choosing between his Ferrari and his Bentley. Does that sound like God's plan to you? Margaret shook her head, crying openly. Joel's desperation became palpable, as his carefully constructed image crumbled in real time. Your Honor, I never asked Mrs. Thompson to give beyond her means. She made that choice herself. It was the worst possible thing he could have said. Judge Judy's eyes flashed with pure rage. She made that choice? After you looked into television cameras and promised her that God would multiply her seed offering? After your ministry sent her personalized letters telling her that bigger faith required bigger giving? She pulled out another document. Mr. Osteen, this is a direct quote from one of your televised sermons. The size of your seed determines the size of your harvest. God is looking for people who will give sacrificially to prove their faith. You said that while sitting in front of a golden backdrop wearing a $3,000 suit. Joel's final attempt at defense was pathetic. Your Honor, I believe God wants to bless His children abundantly. Judge Judy leaned forward with lethal intensity. Then answer me this, Mr. Osteen. If God wants all His children blessed abundantly, why are you the only one in this courtroom who got abundantly blessed? Where's Mrs. Thompson's abundance? Where are the blessings for the thousands of elderly people who funded your lifestyle while they eat cat food to survive? The question shattered whatever composure Joel had left. His trademark smile vanished completely as he sat frozen, unable to respond to the undeniable logic of Judge Judy's attack. The cameras captured every second of his mental collapse as America watched their beloved prosperity preacher revealed as nothing more than a sophisticated con artist who had built an empire on the desperation of vulnerable people. But Judge Judy wasn't done. What she was about to reveal from that folder would destroy not just Joel's reputation, but expose the entire prosperity gospel as a calculated fraud designed to exploit the faithful. Judge Judy reached for the final document in her manila folder, but instead of pulling it out, she closed the folder and stared directly into Joel Osteen's eyes. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as she leaned forward with the intensity that had made her a legend. Mr. Osteen, I'm going to ask you one simple question, and I want a yes or no answer. No theology, no scripture quotes, no religious double talk. Just yes or no. Joel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He could sense the trap closing around him, but he had nowhere to run. Judge Judy's voice became deadly, quiet, each word measured and precise. Did Jesus die rich or poor? The 8 words hit Joel like a physical blow. His mouth opened, then closed as his brain struggled to process the theological checkmate he had just walked into. The cameras captured every second of his mental paralysis as 12 million viewers watched America's most successful prosperity preacher realize he had been cornered by the most basic question in Christianity. 5 seconds passed in complete silence. Then 10. Joel looked desperately around the courtroom, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. 15 seconds. 20. His hands began to visibly shake as the weight of the question crushed his entire theological foundation. 25 seconds. 30. The silence was deafening, and every person in that courtroom understood they were witnessing the destruction of the prosperity gospel in real time. 35 seconds. 40. Joel's breathing became labored as he stared at Judge Judy, unable to form words. Finally, after 45 excruciating seconds that felt like an eternity, Joel whispered in a voice barely audible through his microphone. He died poor. The admission sent shockwaves through the courtroom and across America. Judge Judy's response was swift and devastating. Then why are you telling people that following Jesus will make them rich? Joel's empire had just collapsed with 8 simple words that exposed the fundamental lie at the heart of prosperity theology. If you can't believe what you just witnessed, smash that subscribe button, because Judge Judy's final verdict will leave you speechless too. Judge Judy's verdict was swift and merciless. Mr. Osteen, you are ordered to return Mrs. Thompson's entire $85,000 immediately, plus $50,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress caused by your predatory religious practices. Joel sat in stunned silence as she continued her devastating assault. Furthermore, I'm recommending this case to the FBI for investigation into possible mail fraud and racketeering under the RICO Act. You've been running a religious Ponzi scheme, and it ends today. The courtroom erupted as cameras captured Joel's complete humiliation. His legal team frantically whispered damage control strategies, but the footage was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Within 30 minutes, Dear Jesus Rich or Poor was trending worldwide, with the 45-second silence clip being viewed millions of times. Joel's desperate attempt to salvage his reputation fell flat. Your Honor, I've dedicated my life to helping people find hope and faith, he stammered. Judge Judy's response was brutal. You've dedicated your life to stealing from desperate people while living like a king. Mrs. Thompson will get her money back, but the thousands of other victims of your prosperity gospel scam deserve justice too. This court hereby orders a full financial audit of Lakewood Church's donor practices. The aftermath was immediate and catastrophic. Joel's empire had been demolished by 8 words, and the prosperity gospel would never recover from this public execution. 2 years later, the destruction is complete. Joel Osteen's empire has crumbled spectacularly. Lakewood Church attendance plummeted by 73%, forcing them to sell the Compaq Center and relocate to a strip mall. Joel's book deals evaporated. Speaking fees disappeared, and his television show was canceled after advertisers fled. The FBI investigation led to congressional hearings exposing the prosperity gospel's predatory practices, resulting in new federal regulations on religious fundraising. Margaret Thompson used her settlement to establish the Religious Exploitation Recovery Fund, helping thousands of prosperity gospel victims rebuild their lives. The secret recording Judge Judy possessed was finally played during the congressional hearings, revealing Joel laughing about desperate donors and strategizing how to extract more money from grieving families. The audio destroyed any remaining sympathy for his ministry. Judge Judy's 8 words still echo through churches today. Did Jesus die rich or poor? The simple question that exposed the fundamental lie of prosperity theology continues to liberate believers from financial manipulation, disguised as faith. If this confrontation opened your eyes to the truth about prosperity gospel, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to see it. Tell us in the comments, was Judge Judy right to destroy Joel Osteen's empire to protect vulnerable people? Sometimes the most loving thing is exposing the truth that religious leaders don't want you to hear.